The auction room fell silent as the mirror arrived. Tall, dust-veiled, and bound in black iron like a secret never meant to surface. Elias swore it exhaled when they uncovered it, a faint fog blooming against the glass before fading back into nothing. Maeve laughed softly, dismissing it as humidity, though her voice trembled. Frost adjusted his spectacles and murmured, "Objects remember things, if you know how to listen." When the gavel struck, the room seemed to flicker. For a moment, every reflection moved out of sync, their eyes half a second late to return the gaze. None of them noticed, except the mirror. It had already chosen who would see it next, not as they were, but as they'd be when time finished, sculpting them into strangers. The delivery men refused to carry it past the threshold. Elias ended up dragging it through his narrow hallway alone, its glass flashing dimly with each step. He set it in the study where his unfinished restorations leaned against the walls, like forgotten memories. The air around it felt colder than the rest of the room, as though time slowed nearby. He poured himself a drink and caught his reflection, or what should have been his reflection. The man in the glass had a tremor in his hand, a scar that Elias didn't yet have, and eyes that knew too much. When he blinked, the figure didn't. Elias whispered, "Who are you?" The reflection smiled, lips trembling with pity. Maeve replayed the footage she'd secretly recorded at the auction, frame by frame. Every shot before the gavel looked ordinary. Every shot after, the mirror shimmered, distorting faces like melting wax. Her editor dismissed her theories, calling it lens flare. But Maeve had been staring into stories long enough to know when something was alive. That night she found the lot's previous owner, a widow named Agnes Wren, Elias's late mother. The name tightened something in Maeve's chest. When she asked about the mirror, the widow's photo stared back from an obituary dated only 2 days before the auction. The listing had gone up the morning after her funeral. Dr. Julian Frost sat at his desk, surrounded by stacks of patient journals, the soft ticking of his clock echoing in his bones. He couldn't shake the mirror's strange rhythm. The breathing glass, the delayed reflections. He found references to similar artifacts in his old occult archives, Speculum Animarum, the Mirror of Souls. He wrote a letter addressed to Elias Wren, Restorer, though he'd never met the man outside the auction. His pen paused, as his own reflection in the window blinked twice while he hadn't. The letter trembled in his hand as he whispered to himself, "They see us first." That night, while Elias slept in a chair near the study, the mirror awakened. The room grew impossibly still, as though even the air waited. Its surface rippled faintly, showing flashes, Maeve's apartment window, Frost's writing desk, a distant funeral framed in gray rain. The images flickered like thoughts passing through a mind too large to hold them all. Elias stirred but did not wake. The reflection in the mirror leaned forward slowly, pressing its palm against the glass. Its breath fogged the surface, forming 3 names: Elias, Maeve, Julian. Then, with an almost tender patience, it wiped them away. Elias woke before dawn, a pulse of cold air brushing his cheek. The study was silent, yet the mirror shimmered faintly, catching the gray light from the street. He rubbed his face and froze. The reflection still bore the scar beneath its eye, but this time, so did he. The cut burned as though freshly made, though no blade had touched him. Panic rose, bitter and metallic. He splashed water on his face, but the mirror refused to match him. It smirked as he trembled. In the silence between heartbeats, a faint sound drifted from within the glass. A whispering rhythm like breath against glass, soft and deliberate, saying his name once. Elias. Maeve uploaded her footage to an encrypted drive intending to edit it for her expose. But every clip from the auction had changed. In the background, faces blurred and reformed as if rewritten by memory. Her own reflection stared from the mirror's edge, whispering phrases she hadn't spoken. When she froze a single frame, she saw Elias's face behind her shoulder, though he'd left hours before. The timestamp was impossible. Maeve's throat tightened. The laptop camera light flicked on by itself. For a moment, she could swear she saw her future self in its reflection. Eyes hollow, speaking words she couldn't yet hear. Dr. Frost set a camera before his antique mirror, a smaller twin he once believed harmless. He aimed to test reflection delay under dim conditions, documenting everything in precise notes. At first, nothing changed. Then his reflection began moving fractionally early, as though anticipating him. The reflection lifted its hand before he did. He froze, pen midair, as the mirrored version wrote a word he hadn't. Tomorrow. Frost staggered back. The reflection leaned closer, its lips shaping something silent yet desperate. For the first time in decades, Julian Frost felt true fear, not of death, but of recognition. The mirror grew restless. Elias began hearing faint knocks at night, like gentle taps from the inside. Sometimes it was laughter, soft and childlike, echoing through the glass. The house smelled faintly of rain, though the sky outside was clear. He covered the mirror with a sheet, but it moved on its own, edges fluttering as if something underneath was breathing. When he touched the frame, it pulsed warm against his palm. He whispered, "What do you want?" For the first time, the reflection didn't mirror his lips. It smiled wider, head tilting, and whispered back, "You already know." It happened at the same moment across 3 places. Elias, Maeve, and Frost each faced their mirrors at dusk. For a heartbeat, the world stilled. Then all 3 reflections turned their heads simultaneously. Not toward their counterparts, but toward one another. The glass rippled like water, uniting across distance. Maeve gasped as Frost's face appeared beside hers. Elias's reflection stepped back, its eyes black and infinite. A whisper crossed time and space. "We are almost you." The mirrors darkened, their surfaces cooling to silence. For the first time, none of them could find their own faces staring back. Elias awoke to the sound of dripping water. Though the house was bone dry, he followed it to the study where the mirror gleamed faintly, the floor beneath it damp with condensation. As he knelt, his reflection showed something else. His old apartment, the one he'd left years ago after the fire. His reflection moved through the burning room, holding a framed photograph I'd thought was lost. "That's not real," Elias whispered, but the smoke in the glass coiled toward him. The scent of ash filled the air. His reflection turned, face blackened by soot, and said, "It remembers what you try to forget." When the flames faded, the photograph remained on the floor at his feet, still warm. Maeve dreamt of her reflection standing behind her, brushing her hair with gentle, deliberate strokes. When she woke, her brush lay on the vanity, its bristles damp. Her reflection smiled differently now. Softer, knowing, alive. She raised a hand and the mirrored version didn't mimic her. It waved instead. Maeve felt dizzy, her pulse hammering as she whispered, "Who are you?" The figure leaned close, mouthing words against the glass. Condensation bloomed where its lips touched. "Spelling. You asked for proof." The lights flickered, her laptop screen behind her filled with auction footage looping endlessly. And in every frame, her double was already standing there, waiting. Dr. Frost's letter reached Elias days later, the envelope trembling from Frost's unsteady hand. Inside was a single page. "The mirror is parasitic. It feeds on recognition." Below, scrawled hastily, were coordinates in the phrase, "It must not reflect the living twice." Meanwhile, in his study, Frost had set up another experiment, this time pointing 2 mirrors face to face. For 6 minutes, nothing happened. Then the air crackled. The reflections multiplied into a tunnel of endless selves, each version subtly decayed. Frost leaned closer, recognizing faces of his past patients among them. Some long dead, some whispering his name. The light shattered. Elias studied the scorched photograph from the vision. His mother, Agnes Wren, smiling faintly in front of the same iron-framed mirror. Behind her stood a man Elias didn't recognize, though his posture matched Elias perfectly. He turned the picture over. On the back, written in his mother's elegant script, "One day you'll meet yourself." His stomach nodded. The mirror across the room shimmered faintly, as if hearing its name. He pressed the photo to its surface, and the image rippled like water. For a moment, his mother's voice whispered, soft and close, "You were born in both worlds, my son." At twilight, Elias stood before the mirror again, heart pounding. This time he didn't flinch. "If you're me," he said softly, "then what am I?" The reflection smiled faintly and stepped closer from within the glass. Its movements were slow, graceful, deliberate. "I'm what's left when you stop pretending," it said, voice layered with echoes. The surface of the mirror rippled outward, soundless yet deep as water. Behind the reflection, Elias glimpsed other faces, Maeve's, Frost's, and his mother's, each turning toward him in perfect synchrony. "We are becoming," the reflection whispered. Then the glass fractured, and the room filled with light. Elias stood amid a snowfall of brightness that wasn't falling. The fractured flare from the mirror hung in the air like frozen rain, each shard catching his breath and shaping it into someone else. The frame itself had not shattered, only the idea of a single surface. In every sliver, something different stared back. A hallway he'd never walked, a studio that smelled like turpentine and winter, a woman's hand he half remembered holding. When he reached to pluck one shard free, it turned warm, showing Maeve's apartment as if peered through a keyhole of quicksilver. His phone rang before he could dial. On the other end, his own voice said with tired tenderness, "You still have time." The line clicked dead. From the mirror's depth came a soft, steady exhale, as though the house itself were practicing how to breathe. Maeve arranged notes across her kitchen table, practicing an opening line she wanted to feel like truth rather than spectacle. The laptop woke itself. On screen, her future broadcast cued without her touch. The chyron bore her name, the headline named the mirror, and the woman speaking wore the same shirt, but a different heartbeat. "If you're watching," future Maeve said, eyes rimmed with a sleepless shine, "you have one chance. Do not let it count you twice." The audio lagged, then caught up, her own mouth repeating words she hadn't yet decided to believe. Every reflective surface in the apartment dimmed, as if glass had learned to listen. She closed the screen. The lid's blackness returned her face, softer, frightened, almost kind. For a breath, kindness felt like treason against the story she'd promised to chase. Frost cleared his desk and worked with the slow certainty of someone who has outlived his apologies. Silver nitrate diagrams, archival photographs, the Latin margins he'd once dismissed as theater, all arrayed like instruments for a surgery. It feeds on recognition, he'd written. The rest, he now understood, was appetite for repetition. He chalked a circle on the floor and wrote 3 names at compass points, each stroke steady despite the tremor nesting in his fingers. The house answered with a small pressure, as if weather leaned in to listen. "Things that know your name cannot keep it," he murmured. "If you call them something truer." He chose a word older than his field notes, older than comfort, and whispered it into the mirror's dark. Not a title, but a refusal. The glass bowed inward. A breath taken to swallow or to speak. Or to. They met where the letters' numbers led. A storage unit that smelled of wet iron and old winter. the kind of place where forgotten furniture sleeps without dreaming. Elias had hauled the mirror there at dusk, the iron frame swaddled in moving blankets that never seemed to stay tied. Maeve arrived with her camera and no certainty. Frost locked the door behind them, the bolts echo running off the metal walls like a whispered warning. The mirror recognized the room first, its surface clouded, then cleared to reveal a corridor of identical doors, each standing open inside the glass. "It won't reflect us," Frost said, "until it knows which of us we intend to be." Maeve lifted the lens, then lowered it, ashamed of how hungry she felt for proof. Elias touched the frame and, for a heartbeat, felt his mother's knuckles tapping hello from the other side. They stood before the glass and, for once, it did not answer with their faces. Instead, it offered a room that was almost this room. Same concrete floor, same tin breath in the walls, except for the presence of 3 people shaped like them but turned away, studying something just out of sight. Frost whispered the old word again, firmer this time. The not-quite Frost cocked his head as if listening to a distant rain. Maeve reached for the surface, then stopped, palms suspended over chill light. "If we choose," Elias said softly, surprised by the steadiness of his own voice. "We're choosing the part that survives us." On the other side, the not-quite Elias lifted a hand and placed it flat to the glass. His skin fogged their world. Their breath misted his. For a moment, both rooms held the same exhale. Then the mirror, at last, turned its face away. The storage unit breathed like a lung that had learned patience. Frost's chalk circle smudged under their soles, a pale ring of intention collapsing into grit. Maeve paced, murmuring lines she might say later, if later still existed, while Elias felt for the pulse in the iron frame as one might test a sleeping creature. The mirror showed no faces now, only a corridor swelling toward them, door after door opening on a wind that wasn't there. "It's inviting repetition," Frost said, voice thin but certain. "We have to break the loop, not the glass." Elias thought of his mother's handwriting and the way her letters curved toward forgiveness. He pressed his palm to the surface and let the cold climb his bones. The corridor brightened, like an eye deciding to wake. From somewhere ahead, a soft tapping answered. 3 beats, a pause, 3 beats again. As if a heart were knocking to be let in from the rain. Maeve raised the camera and saw herself already composing the segment, cadence measured, jaw set, eyes holding more mercy than the words allowed. She lowered it and felt the ache of that small betrayal, the distance between telling a story and being inside one. "If we walk in, who comes back to tell it?" she asked, a wryness she didn't feel shaping the question. The mirror answered with a flash of her apartment. The future broadcast paused on a frame where her mouth was open mid-warning. She touched the lens cap and decided, abruptly, to leave it on. "No witnesses," she said. "Only participants." Elias nodded as if she'd just said something he'd needed permission to believe. Frost exhaled, relieved, and the chalk at his feet shivered like a compass finding north. The corridor brightened again, doors widening as if pleased by the narrowing of their choices. Frost drew a small notebook from his pocket, the leather softened by years of apologies, and tore out a page. "Names anchor it," he said, eyes on Elias. "But a name can be spent." He wrote his own with slow precision, then folded the paper once, twice, until it was a hard little square that could be offered like coin. "If it asks for recognition, give it mine." Elias began to protest. Frost only smiled, a weary tenderness, brightening the ruin of his night. "I have practiced leaving," he said. "Let me do it properly." He placed the folded name on the frame. The glass inhaled, widening, and a second corridor bloomed, running beside the first like a vein. Somewhere far within, another Frost turned, hearing himself called from 2 directions at once. "Stay with my voice," the living one whispered, as if mercy could be threaded across mirrors like wire. Elias unwrapped a strip of canvas from his tool bag and tied one end around the mirror's leg, the other around his wrist. A restorer's knot meant to hold, while still forgiving the wood beneath it. "If I change," he said. "Pull." Maeve looped a cable from her kit around his waist, then clipped it to a dolly ring bolted to the floor. "Redundancy saves lives," she muttered, half to cover the tremor in her voice. Frost adjusted the knot without comment, then pressed his forehead to the cold frame for the briefest, most human prayer. The mirror brightened as if fed. The tapping returned. 3 beats, pause, 3 beats. Now closer, now impatient. Elias felt the rhythm answering beneath his ribs. He remembered his mother's knuckles on a door, how she'd made any house sound like home. "I'll knock back," he whispered, and struck the glass with 2 gentle taps and a promise wrapped in them. He stepped forward, and the world grew thin. The glass yielded like breath on water, cool and close, carrying the mineral taste of storms that haven't happened yet. May's hand closed around the tether. Frost's voice threaded after him, careful and steady, naming small, ordinary things. "Coffee, Tuesday," the stubborn hinge on his office door. As if listing anchors could wait a man. The corridor accepted Elias as though it had been built to his measurements. Doors watched him pass. In one, he saw his mother setting a table for no one. In another, Maeve turning off a camera with shaking fingers. In another, Frost pausing at a window, finally letting himself weep. The tapping moved ahead, leading. "I'm coming," Elias said, and the corridor shivered with recognition so complete it hurt. Behind him, the tether held. Ahead, a door swung fully open, and a familiar scarred hand reached out from the future to take his. Elias followed the tug of the canvas line until the corridor narrowed into a room arranged with deliberate mercy. A table laid with a single plate, a chair angled as if awaiting a confession, a window where weather stalled. Raindrop. The other him stood beside the table, the same mouth, the same scar, except the wear around the eyes had learned a language Elias hadn't. "You kept the knot," the future said, nodding to the tether. "Good. You'll need it to leave." The door behind them sighed shut, sealing sound like a jar. A damp scent of turpentine curled from an unseen easel. "What did you trade for this place?" Elias asked. The future's smile thinned. "Not trade. Accrue." On the window's skin, the breath of some unseen listener fogged a circle, as if a child were watching from the other side of the paused rain. The circle slowly widened until it became a 0. Outside the mirror, Maeve measured her fear the way reporters measure risk, by sequence and by count. 10 doors had opened when Elias crossed. Now 11 pulsed faintly within the glass, a metronome for her heart. Frost steadied the line, muttering small facts to keep the present anchored. She checked the knots, checked the floor ring, checked the battery on a camera she refused to uncap. All habits from a life built on witnesses. In the silver depth, she thought she saw herself slip between doors, hair looser, mouth softer, carry a notebook rather than a lens. The sight irritated her. She had loved the camera's severity, the way it required distances. "If he is late," Frost said gently, reading her silence, "we pull on 3, she nodded, though her palms had already made that choice. The mirror breathed, and the 11th door blinked like a tired eye. The future set the covered easel upright and gestured for Elias to stand beside him. "I kept a ledger," he said. "Not of sins, those tally themselves, but of small forgivenesses. They interest the mirror more." He lifted the cloth. The canvas showed a triptych of rooms. The study with the sleeping chair. A kitchen scattered with unmade mornings. This gray-lit chamber where time had forgotten to finish a storm. In each panel, Elias stood almost where he stood now, but with differences so slight they felt like accusations. "I painted exits," the future murmured. Only one works. He tapped the third panel, where a door's handle bore fingerprints the color of ash. This one asks for a name. Elias thought of his mother's, handwriting curving toward mercy. He swallowed, tasted rain, and realized he'd been carrying the right word like a splinter under his tongue. The air around the storage unit thickened, like a theater waiting for the cue line. Frost felt the tug inside the mirror before the tether moved at all, an intention traveling up the rope like heat. He knew what it asked. His folded name, warming in his pocket, answered with a pulse against his palm. If he needs a door, he said, let mine pay the fee. Maeve shook her head, then stopped when she saw the steadiness in him, a steadiness she associated with people who had already rehearsed their endings. He slid the small square along the frame until it touched the glass. The mirror inhaled. For a second it carried his office's smell and the chalk dust of years. Keep me twice, Frost told the dark. If that's the price, but leave the boy only once. The folded paper vanished like a coin into water. In the painted panel, the ash-smeared handle brightened, and Elias understood the ledger's arithmetic. Forgiveness subtracted from fear until a name could be spoken without it becoming a weapon. He pressed his palm to the third door, felt grain rise like goose flesh, and said his mother's name as if returning it to her. The room shuddered. Rain outside the window finally fell, finishing the gesture the world had been holding. The future's shoulders loosened, something like pride and grief blending in his eyes. Take the exit I couldn't, he whispered. From the storage unit, the tether jerked, welcoming. Elias turned once more to the version of himself who had waited too long. Come with me, he said. The other shook his head, smiling like a brother who chooses the night watch. I'm what stays. The door swung wide. Elias stepped through, and the corridor bent toward home. Elias stumbled through the threshold like a swimmer breaking surface, the corridor collapsing behind him in a hiss of rain that wasn't wet. Maeve caught the tether, bracing with a sound that was half laugh, half sob. Frost steadied them both, his palm firm on Elias's shoulder, as if confirming physics had kept its promise. The mirror's light dimmed to a weary pulse. He stayed, Elias said, voice roughened by the room that learned his name. No one asked which he. The iron frame cooled under their hands, an animal settling after a panic. For a long moment they listened to the storage unit breathe, the metal walls clicking as temperature remembered how to change. We have to end its appetite, Frost murmured. Maeve nodded, already translating intention into steps. Remove angles, remove witnesses, remove the chance to be seen twice. Elias closed his eyes and pictured a place with no faces but the skies. Maeve uncapped the camera at last and looked through the viewfinder, expecting clarity and receiving hunger. A soft warping at the edges, a tiny thirst for repetition. She saw the three of them arranged like a thesis the mirror would love to cite. Carefully, almost gently, she lowered the camera and set it on the concrete. No audience, she said, and brought her heel down. The crack was small, spidering, but it traveled like a decision through glass. Her throat burned. This was how she had taught herself to live, by framing. Frost nodded once, the respect of one craft paying another farewell. Elias watched her choose silence and felt something give way inside him that wasn't fear. She gathered the ruined camera into her arms as if it were a child who had fallen, and carried it to the far corner, where reflections dim. We speak it once, she said. Then we let it starve. The folded square of paper was gone, spent like coin into a dark well, yet Frost felt the tug of himself within the glass, a second keeping already accruing interest. He drew a stick of chalk and wrote his name on the concrete, then circled it once, twice, A third time each loop a smaller orbit. Recognition binds, he said. But so does refusal. He blew across the letters and they blurred to pale weather. In the mirror, a corridor muttered awake, and half a dozen Frosts turned their heads toward him with patient hunger. He raised his palm, not to greet but to deny, and spoke the older word, the one that was not a title but a closing of a door. The faces in the glass hesitated, losing contour like breath on winter air. For the first time since the auction, the mirror seemed unsure, as if appetite had met an empty plate and could not remember what it had planned to eat. They turned their backs to the glass. It felt untheatrical and thus correct. Elias faced the roll-up door, counting slow breaths. Maeve stared at the corrugated wall until the metal's repeating lines imprinted on her sight like a staff with no notes. Frost closed his eyes and named small earthly anchors: teak kettle, wool cuff, paper cut, none of which the mirror could swallow. Behind them, the surface tried to coax with soft taps and kinder versions of their voices, offering edits where life had been inelegant. "No," Maeve said, not loudly, and the word hung like a cloth over a cage. The taps ceased. Cold bled out of the air. The iron frame ticked, cooling, a kettle taken off heat. When they turned around, the mirror showed only the storage unit. No corridor, no doubles, just a dull, imperfect pane, reflecting a room that didn't owe it anything. For the first time, it looked heavy with its own quiet. At dawn, they drove to the salt flats, where horizon is a single word repeated until it forgets itself. They uncrated the mirror and set it to face the sky. No passerby, no building, only distance and a pale sun climbing without expression. Wind combed their clothes and left them in a grammar older than names. Elias touched the iron once in farewell and felt no pulse beneath it, only the steady sleep of a thing unlooked at. Maeve stood beside him, empty-handed and strangely light, as if the camera had been a weight that taught her posture. Frost removed his spectacles and let the day blur. Even without edges, it helped. "This is how we keep each other once," he said. They walked away without turning back, and the mirror, starved of recognition, learned another trade: to reflect a sky that does not know itself, and therefore never asks to be fed.